Yesterday, it was the Blackfish crossover. Now it's the Blackfish takeover. Welcome back to another episode of Canucks Conversation brought to you by Bet365. Check out the app today. My name is Tyson Cole. I'm joined by Harmon Dial, and our technical producer today is Jake Fraser. Hence, the Blackfish takeover. What's going on, Harm? How you doing? Harm, you're muted.
Oh, shoot. Didn't realize my mic was muted there. No, I was just saying uh, Quad's off today. He's under the weather, but excited to have you on today. Chop up about the NHL draft and then the craziness around the NHL offseason and a couple of big trades already. I feel like there are going to be one or two more by the end of the day at this rate. It's been bananas.
Yeah, it's going crazy right now. Well, we've got a couple trades. Let's just get right into it, right? As Quads would probably want us to lead off with the NBA, Giannis Antetokounmpo to the Miami Heat. What do you think about that, Harm?
So I wanted to mention this on Eklund because like this literally just came in a minute ago that Friedman tweeted it, the actual return, right? Because we saw the reports earlier that Eklund to Eklund to Ottawa, Sharks are getting the 9th overall pick as part of this. Sens are also getting a couple of prospects. So interestingly, San Jose has 2 picks now in the top 9. And I'm really fascinated to see what they do with this. And specifically, this is going to have ramifications for the Canucks because now all of a sudden I'm thinking they've positioned themselves to take Stenberg at 2 and then still land a defenseman at 9, like a Daxon Rudolph, for example.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say that definitely takes them out of defenseman at 2 if they're getting 9. I had speculated, I was like, oh, maybe 25 and Jordan Spence. I don't know if that's enough, maybe a little bit more, because Eklund's a pretty good skilled winger. So seeing it be the 9th overall pick, I didn't see that coming. I thought they would try and use it on kind of maybe somebody more better. I know they were wanting a Jason Robertson, but what did you think? Like, what do you think there? Like, do you think that's fair value there for Eklund?
Yeah, we'll see what else is involved in terms of the prospects that are apparently going to Ottawa. I think the biggest challenge the Sens faced in trying to find top 6 help is that they aren't a destination where a lot of players want to go to, right? So sure, you can have the assets for Jason Robertson, but if Robertson, who's an RFA, doesn't want to sign with you long term, you can't pull that off. Same thing with an offer sheet scenario. Similar thought process with Jordan Kyrou, who had trade protection, right? And so when I look at William Eklund as a trade, like if I were to come up with a board of hypothetical targets it could have gone after making the Kachuk trade, in terms of who would be realistically available and actually want to go to San Jose, I think Eklund is a really good fit for them. I think he is probably closer to a high-end second-line winger rather than a true first-line star, although there might be some untapped upside for him to get closer to the 70-point range. I like the age range. It is noteworthy that he needs a contract in a couple of years, I believe. He's on a cheaper bridge at around $5 million right now. So fascinated to see what that looks like in the future, especially if his production pops. But clearly the goal for Ottawa was we need to stay competitive right now, especially because Stützle and Sanderson are in the prime of their careers. And when I think about the downgrade from Brady to Eklund, yeah, it's significant in terms of the size factor, and Eklund obviously isn't a power forward, but in terms of pure offense, it's not a huge discrepancy between the two, especially if Eklund can kind of take the next step in a big opportunity in Ottawa.
Yeah, absolutely. We have the trade details now. Kasper Hultinen, Brandon Svoboda. I butchered that. I apologize. But those are the 2 prospects going over to the Sens way. I believe Hultinen was a former first-round pick or second-round pick. I believe he's a Finnish winger with some size and skill. So I don't know. It's a heavy price to pay. But I mean, Eklund, they're betting on that upside, and he kind of matches the age range and the window of the Senators. So I just didn't expect them to move the 9th pick. That was surprising to me. But yeah, I mean, we've got another trade to talk about as well. It wasn't just Ottawa and San Jose. It was the Calgary Flames. They traded a bunch of picks, but they got Simone Nemec and Maxim Siplikov. Uh, kind of the writing was kind of on the wall. We kind of always knew that Simone Nemec wasn't really long for New Jersey. They just extended Luke Hughes a couple years back, and he wasn't really getting the ice time that he wanted, so he finds a new home. Interestingly enough, though, it doesn't come with a contract extension, so he is an RFA. I would imagine that they are going to get a deal done. If you acquire a player, the player feels wanted, right? And he wouldn't have felt that in New Jersey, so I would imagine that's something that gets done. But what was your initial reaction when you saw that trade come through?
Yeah, I kind of like this for both sides. I think New Jersey had to do this. I like it more for the Devils than I do the Flames. Where moving him for a significant haul, it made sense for a variety of reasons. Just the contract itself, right off the bat. There were reports out there that he kind of wanted Luke Hughes money, even if he didn't quite get to a $9 million AAV. The projection on his next deal, according to AFP Analytics, was in the $8 million AAV range. And when you look at how many high-priced defenders the Devils already have in the back end, where you've got Luke Hughes making $9 million, Dougie Hamilton making $9 million, and overall they've got 5 defensemen on the roster that count for at least $4 million against the cap. There's just no way they could have committed large money to another defenseman. Somebody had to go. There's a logjam on that right side of that Devils blue line. And even big picture, you look at New Jersey's needs this offseason, they need to add top 6 scoring punch, because what happens to the Devils is anytime Jack Hughes gets hurt, their scoring just falls off a cliff because they're way too top heavy and reliant on Jack Hughes and Jesper Bratt and Nico Hischier to do the heavy lifting for them offensively. So it just never made sense from a cap perspective, A. And secondly, I think there are some questions about what exactly Nemec is at the NHL level. He's clearly got poise with the puck. He can make an impact in transition, and he's got some offensive potential without a doubt. You can see a lot of potential there, but he is very much a project. And you look at specifically the defensive side of his game, his defensive analytics are very, very poor. And that's part of the reason why when the Canucks were discussing or were shopping Quinn Hughes and Devils fans were throwing around trade packages with Simone Nemec in it, I didn't love the idea of the Canucks bringing Nemec in because I just wasn't sure whether he'd be able to defend at a high enough level. And now going to Calgary, I actually don't mind the bet for them in this scenario, because the Flames have stockpiled an embarrassment of draft picks and prospects. So you're at the point now where, especially with what they gave up, which was 2 firsts, which will presumably be late, and a second round pick. People will hear 2 first round picks and a second round pick and go, whoa, the Flames overpaid a ton. And yeah, it is a strong return for New Jersey considering the circumstances. But we've talked about this before. The odds of landing a meaningful impact contributor once you get into the 20s of the first round go down a lot compared to the first round picks that are actually in the first 15 to 18 slots. So with that in mind, you're exchanging 2 late firsts and a second when, as Calgary, you've already amassed so many picks and prospects. I think the upside bet on Nemec, specifically considering his pedigree and the offensive potential he's shown, I don't mind this bet for them either. And I think the more interesting part is I'm just a little surprised that they made it because they already have a young, budding offensive right shot D with defensive question marks in Zane Parak.
Yeah, that was the part of the trade that I was a little confused about. But I mean, hey, they could run. I mean, you know, Parekh on the top pair, Nemec on the second pair. Like they can run them not together, but in tandem, right? Sure up their top 4, but yeah, it was questionable. But they're going to have the opportunity to give him all the opportunity in the world to become a budding star that he is, and see what they actually have in him. But I think it was for Calgary, like you said, I don't hate it. Like you have those first round picks, right? And like you said, Vegas, Colorado, they should be late 20s. And like there comes a point where you need to just get rid of your draft picks, right? Like You're not going to hit on all of them, especially in the back half of the first round. So why not get rid of them? Like you can only collect so much. And I'm still looking at it now. They got two this year, two first this year, and then 3 seconds, and then 2 seconds and 2 seconds. So they've done well to accumulate draft picks over the years. So I think it was just time to turn those futures into something that can help contribute now. And now my question is, because I thought like Carson Carroll's, if he fell to 6, that would have been a slam dunk, and it still might be because he's a left shot and the two guys are right shot. But now to me, it just screams like, okay, they're gonna go Vigo Bjork.
Yeah, that was one of my first thoughts as well. Especially, I definitely would be surprised now if it was one of the righties, Verhoff or Rudolph. But yeah, Bjork feels like a great fit for them now in that range, especially because he's not far from being an NHL ready contributor. And when you look at the Flames down the middle, I think they could use a guy with that high end potential. I think the other part for Calgary is they have the cap space, right? They can afford to roll the dice. And the risk for Calgary in signing Nemec's next contract is a lot lower than New Jersey doing it, because New Jersey is in a clear win now window where every cap dollar is precious, where they're capped out, way too much money already invested on the back end. And for the Devils, I'm more interested to see what they do next, because they, under Sonny Meta, are facing a big challenge here. Do you remember 3 years ago, roughly, when they beat the New York Rangers in the first round? They had one of the best regular seasons in franchise history that year. And everybody was talking about New Jersey in the same way that we talk about Montreal right now, is this team's going to be in it year in and year out. And of course, Montreal won the extra playoff round this year and actually made the Eastern Conference, whereas New Jersey only won one round and lost in the second round. So it's not a perfect comparable, but the hype was through the roof, especially because it was the age range of their core players. They had cap space at the time. Luke Hughes and Simone Nemec weren't even full-time NHL contributors yet. So you were thinking, all right, this is actually a pretty deep prospect pool. You've got 2 top 10 picks ready to make a difference as well. And in the last 3 seasons, they've just been derailed by inconsistency and injuries, locker room dysfunction towards this year, especially when the Quinn Hughes trade didn't exactly come to fruition. And now you are under pressure to take advantage of the prime of Hughes and Hischier, and especially he needs a new contract. So how are they going to use those picks? Because to me, they're not going to be drafting players with those. They're going to be looking to trade off of those and acquire top 6 forward help.
Yeah, that was my question. Like those first round picks are not going to be. New Jersey's not going to select them if I'm betting. Because they need to get better. They need to get better up front. Like you mentioned, their depth goes way down the hole, because like now they're slotting in Dawson Mercer as their 2C when Jack Hughes inevitably gets hurt every year. So like, and then there goes your third line scoring helps, and then they really have nothing. Like Cody Glass did like a fine job on that third line this year, but yeah, I would imagine that they're going to go out there this season and maybe trade a couple of those guys. And that we have a question in the chat here from Rajcraft. It was from earlier. Does this end the DeBrusk to Ottawa possibility with the Eklund trade? And we can go back to the Eklund trade, but I just wonder now, like, is that a fit potentially in New Jersey? Is a DeBrusk or a Besser possibility over there? I don't know.
Yeah, I can't quite see Brock as a fit in New Jersey, because his contract, I think, would be too risky for them and their cap situation. DeBrusk is more manageable at 5.5, so maybe that's something they consider. I do think for like DeBrusk to Ottawa, to go back to Roshcraft's initial question, it does reduce the chances. I'm not going to say that it completely removes the fit entirely, though, just because the Sens needed top 6 help even when Brady Tkachuk was on that team. So, okay, you bring in William Eklund. You look at Ottawa's projected lines on dailyfaceoff.com. Ridley Gregg is their second line left winger right now. And I love me some Ridley Gregg, don't get me wrong, but he should be on your third line if you're looking to be a playoff team. And also, Eklund fits a different role as a top 6 winger than DeBrusk, where Eklund's more shifty. He's obviously a lot smaller. he has more dynamic skill, whereas DeBrusk is more of, all right, PP1 net front, complimentary guy that's just going to go to the front of the net, and you need playmakers to feed him the puck in those spots. So it doesn't rule them out entirely, but the issue now is you've traded away, as part of this deal, the 9th overall pick. If I'm Steve Staios, I'm less inclined to also want to move pick number 2025.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. Because I don't necessarily know if Eklund's going to replace the goals that Tkachuk's going to leave behind, right? But Jake DeBrusk can do that, especially at the net front on the power play, like you had mentioned. So I still think they're on the table there, but we'll have to see. I mean, at this point, by the end of the show, we're going to have another trade or two to talk about. So, yeah. So I guess, did you have anything else on the trades, Harm, that you wanted to get off your chest, or should we get to our poll question?
Let's get to the poll question.
All right. Jake Fraser helped us out with the poll question today. Question is, well, now this is a pretty good talking point because, if Stenberg was there, the pick would obviously be Stenberg. But if the Canucks do pick a defenseman at 3rd overall, who would you prefer? Chase Reed is currently in the lead right now at 49%, followed by Carson Karls at 35.9%, 14.2% Keaton Verhoff, and then other 0.9%. Harm, did you answer the poll? What would be your answer?
This is really close to me. I would lean ever so slightly toward Reed. I've gone back and forth over this a lot over the last couple of weeks. I like both players a lot. I think Reed, I've come around to him a little bit more now that I've understood the context around his lack of elite scoring in the OHL this season, where, we pointed this out and mentioned it earlier. Cam Robinson had a great write-up where OHL scoring's down a lot. I think if you look at the CHL broadly, there were 507 fewer goals scored compared to the 2023-24 season. So you have to look at not only Reed, but kind of all these guys with that context in mind. And when you look at Reed's era adjusted points per game, that suddenly catapults him into a slightly higher tier. And whereas before I was looking at it and going, oh, he produced way less than Evan Bouchard. Now it's, all right, he didn't produce as much as Evan Bouchard, but it's not as significant of a drop off. And also just watching him a little bit more, I'm starting to really like his skating ability up and down the ice, how he can carry pucks, the impact in transition, and also the evolution of his defensive game, right? OHL coaches poll, he was ranked as the Western Conference's second best defensive defenseman, in addition to being the number 1 ranked offensive defenseman. And you look at, again, some of the micro stats I talked about yesterday, top 10 in the league in puck battles won, number 1 in takeaways. That part of his game has come along very nicely. And I think with Caleb Malhotra, we spent a lot of time talking about the rocket ship trajectory of his development, where last year Malhotra was like a middle of the road BCHL player. And to go from that to, by the end of the year, you're dominating the OHL playoffs is a rate of improvement that is extremely impressive. And it makes you think, all right, if he shot up that much in a year, what could the leap from age 18 to 19 look like? And does that mean his ceiling is maybe higher than it looks like today? Well, it's a similar story for Chase Reed, where last year in the OHL, he took off, but before then he was kicking around in, I think it was the NAHL. Like, he was a 7th round OHL pick. Nobody thought that he was going to take the huge leap that he did in the second half of last year. And when you look at his rate of improvement as well, like, this is, again, not a guy that was expected to be huge difference maker. Plus, I don't know if you saw this, Big Ed Hockey. I'm actually friends with him, Francis. He looked at these risers, right? When you have, in the last, let's say, 5 to 10 years, defensemen and forwards that shoot up the rankings compared to the start of the season and the end of the season. And Malhotra and Reed would both fall into this category because at the start of the year, nobody was really talking about them as potential top 3, top 5 picks. When you look at the defensemen specifically, and it's a really small sample size, I think it's like 4 guys. Uh, a lot of them ended up, well, like pretty much all of them in recent memory actually ended up becoming stars. And I think that includes like Jake Sanderson, Cale Makar. I think I can't remember the other 2 off the top of my head, but in recent memory, these like fast rising defensemen that end up going top 5, they have actually panned out. Whereas for the forwards, it was a little bit more mixed because you had guys like Mason McTavish that worked their way into their conversation, and some of them panned out, but some of them haven't.
Yeah, I did see that big head hockey thing, and it was very impressive. And I'm not trying to discount Chase Reed by any means. What's so impressive to me is like he was cut. You know why he's in the OHL? He was cut by his USHL team, so he went to the OHL, and now look at him. Like now he's going to go top 3, top 5 in the draft. I will say before we continue on with the Reed and Carroll's discussion, apparently you guys do ad reads on the show. We don't have those over at Blackfish, and someone, I'm not pointing any fingers, might have forgot to do one. But this segment is brought to you by Greta, a great spot for all games, no matter the sport. Vibes downtown are great, so head on down to Greta with the arcade, bar, and street food menu. Greta's a great spot. Make it your spot to watch the next game. 50 West Cordova is the address. Let the games begin. I have people who watch Blackfish know that I am more of a Carroll's guy over Reed, but I will say like it's very thin margin. And at first I just wanted to do it just to be different because Dave had Reed, and then I started watching Carroll's a little bit, and I compared the two, and honestly, like they're both fantastic. Like I see a lot of similarities both in their game. If I would say who's better offensively, like Reed's the better skater, but ever so slightly. He has the better shot, but like I would still categorize it as a tie. The vision goes to Reed, but like if it's that close, and I see that the physicality is so far in Carl's favor, then that is kind of what has tipped me over the scale to go Carl's. And a lot of people I've talked to have said like, oh yeah, if Carl's was a right-handed shot, he'd go first overall, or not first overall, but he'd be the first defenseman in the class, and could very well actually be first overall. So if that is something that I hear, I'm like, okay, if we're just gonna take Reed because he's a right shot over Carroll's, then Carroll's is the better defenseman in my opinion. Just why are we discounting him because he's a left shot? Sure, it's easier to get that, but if we're looking who's the better defenseman, if we're just talking handedness, and that's why we're going Reed over Carl's, then I'm going to side with Carl's. And I don't know. I watched him, and so I don't want to base it all on that because I've seen this guy play. I haven't seen Reed play, but I mean, he took over the WHL top prospects game, and that was against the best players in his peers, like of the draft year. And he was crushing guys. Like in the first period, he hit someone against the boards, knocked him out of the game. He was gone, and then goes on to pick up 4 assists, and 3 of them in the third period when his team was down. Like he had that clutch gene. He was able to dance through all the top prospects, like go end to end. Like he was great. And something that I told you a little bit about this before we went live, Harm, but I did a little study. I just wanted to see like and I know points per game isn't everything, but it is something. And so I wanted to look at like, okay, who in their draft season in the same league had the same points per game and that made it to the NHL? Like who was kind of the bust range, who was kind of like, okay, these guys pop. And I did that with Carl's, and there wasn't anybody except for I did the study for 2000s and before and on. Scott Niedermayer was the only one that was before, and he was obviously before 2000, but that was ahead of Carl's. He had a 1.44 points per game as a defenseman in the WHL, and obviously scoring is different. And Scott Niedermayer's a Hall of Famer, Stanley Cup champ. I'm not saying Carl's is going to be that, but no one else had put up the point production that Carl's had until like since Scott Niedermayer. So I'm like that we haven't seen this before. Obviously the WHL is kind of higher scoring, and I know This year it might have been down, which makes it even more impressive that Carl's is putting up these numbers. And so when I see all of that and put it all together, and I'm like, okay, and I don't know, when he said he wants to bring a Stanley Cup back to Canada, I'm like, hell yeah, you do. That got to me a little bit, but obviously taking that part out of it, it's razor thin, but that's kind of why I have Carl's preferably over Reed.
Yeah, and I don't even like hearing you make the case for Carl's. I'm almost like leaning back on the Carl's bandwagon. Like that's how close the margin is. I think that's the greater
Mm-hmm.
takeaway is a lot of times when I'm doing, let's say, like draft prep or coverage, whether I'm right or wrong, at the time of the draft, I feel confident that this is clearly who I think is the better bet right now. Doesn't mean I'll be right and that prospect will actually end up becoming the better NHL player, but I at least feel like, okay, this is who I want. I feel decisive. Whereas in this case, like the margin is so thin, and this is where it gets so
Mm-hmm.
interesting with draft and prospect coverage in general, where you'll have these debates, and I think one like one fan might end up on the Reed side, the other might end up on the Carson Carl side or the Caleb Malhotra side, and all of them will speak so passionately about this is definitely the better prospect, and your guy isn't going to make it, and people feel so confident in these takes. Whereas I think the reality in this case right now is if you're the Canucks, these prospects are all in the same tier. And so, like, yeah, when you talk to Reed and do your background check, something as small as, all right, if you have concerns about the American side and is he going to be committed to playing in Canada long term, like something as small as that could actually be the difference maker. And going, you know what, as players, they're so close to value that might push it over the edge. Um, like these are two special players. I guess on Carl's, a couple questions that I kind of had. Like one, this isn't so much a question, but the mean streak, I love it, and it kind of gives me look. He's not as big as Moritz Seider, but you don't see many like top pair defensemen with that kind of edge anymore. And
Mm-hmm.
I just it reminded me a little bit of Mo Seider and just having that edge and that meanness and that nastiness, which is very much a plus, and I like it. On the offensive side, it's so interesting because he's as you mentioned, put up this historical WHL production as a defenseman, and yet scouts and evaluators aren't talking about him even necessarily as a PP1 guy. And even when you watch him play, he's definitely not the flashiest player. So where do you stand on his offensive potential? Because on one hand, you have elite, almost never heard of production. But on the other hand, when you watch him play, the tools don't stand out to you, even though they're good.
Yeah, I would say he projects to me as a two-way defenseman. I think the reason you're not hearing like a lot of scouts say like, oh yeah, he's going to run your PP1 or whatever is because you think of those guys as like a Cale Makar and a Quinn Hughes and Elaine Hudson and all that. And even Chase 3, like he has that shiftiness where Carlos doesn't really have that. You know, he's more of like north-south offense rather than the east-west that you see with all the other PP1 power play quarterbacks, right? And so that's kind of why I would say that, but I mean, he did just fine, you know, playing that north south more downwind type of game. And do I think like you put him on the Canucks, I would have Zeev Buium running the power play because he projects to be more of that east west and um, type of guy, like shifty blue liner. But that doesn't mean that he can't put up the points. You know, like think about like what Philip Hronik was with Quinn Hughes. You know what I mean? Like he was still able to do it, and then once Quinn Hughes had left, Hronik shined, right? Offensively. Like he had his best season. So I feel like he's as good as he is, like he might be more of a complementary to that power play one guy. But by no means should you like discount him for what he can do. Like if you put him on the San Jose Sharks, just say they pick him at second overall. It's not going to happen after the trade today, but he's he's probably power play one over Sam Dickinson. So it's all situational, right? It depends where he's going to end up in the draft.
Is he left-handed Phil Hronik to you? Like just hearing that description where all around he's got offensive pop, defends hard, competes hard. I literally just thought of this right now, but I'm curious where you see the similarities and some of the differences.
Yeah, he's a meaner Filip Hronik, and I know Phil Hronik's mean, but like he'll lay you through the glass. Like it doesn't matter. Some of like after this, just go watch some of his highlight reels of just his hits, man. Like there was one behind the net. He just his whole body was above the like on the glass. This one guy, so he's not afraid to throw the body. I do like that Philip Hronik comp, but just probably with a little bit more offensive upside. And yeah, I guess to answer your question before, like no one talks about his offense because Chase Reed is the offensive guy in the class, you know? So that just he gets overshadowed and his view is like looked upon as, the better two-way player, blah blah blah. But yeah, I wouldn't write off his offensive at all. And I mean, if he turns out to be a Philip Hronik top pairing mean physical defenseman, I think they hit a home run there.
Yeah, and I think the main takeaway is heading into the draft. I think I'm on team defenseman, right? Like
Yeah.
I don't really care whether it's Reed, whether it's Carl's. I do lean towards one of those over Malhotra. And again, the margins are slim, right? I'm not going to rip the Canucks by any means if they take Malhotra. That's a totally reasonable pick considering the trajectory. And also with Malhotra, I think it's interesting that I, I haven't crunched the numbers for this, but I do think there's something to the intangible of sons of NHLers outproducing or outperforming their draft year statistical profile, where you look at Jackson Blake, right? And these are different
Mhm.
situations because Blake was never a pedigree guy, but he was a fourth round pick, son of Jason Blake. Like he didn't really produce, and he's beat the odds and is now a stud of a top six winger in Carolina. You look at Josh Doan, right? Not much of a point producer in his draft year, so much so that when Utah took him in the mid range of one of the middle rounds, people were thinking that was a nepotism pick. Oh, just a storybook, like doing it for the PR to
Mhm.
take Shane Doan's son. And yet you look at the player he's become. He's he's clearly outperformed that and hit like the 95th percentile, 99th percentile outcome of a third or fourth round pick. I'm sure that like there were a couple of examples too that I can't think of off the top of my head, but that part's interesting. And yet, I do think the upside with these defensemen is still a bit higher and a bit more certain.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And anyone who's watched Blackfish understands that my take on Malhotra, like he deserves to shoot up the ranks, but I don't think he's the right pick if you just want to go positionally at Malhotra or to take Malhotra at 3. I I do kind of take into effect like obviously there are a ton of examples of late risers and stuff, but I do take effect like what you've done kind of to get your way here, right? Like Stenberg and McKenna have always been kind of, the top of their age group for this season for in terms of prospects, right? But Malhotra, like coming into the year, he was like teetering on a first round pick, didn't have a very good BCHL year. And so I was like, okay, why are you going to take him over? Sure, you have the bloodlines and everything. And I mean, you gave two great examples there. There are also examples that doesn't work out, where the guy is never good as his father, right? Never can live up to that. So, and I'm not saying Malhotra can't do that. I think he deserves to be the top center off the board, but um, yeah, I think I agree with you for sure that it should be a defenseman, and I know that Reed has shot up as well, but um, got like my argument for it at the time was talking about Verhoff, um, because, and I used the 2016 comparison. Have you heard this? Have you heard my spiel on this?
No, I haven't.
Okay. 2016, heading into the year, there were two defensemen ranked in the top 5. And there was one BCHL center that was, kind of same as Malhotra, not really in the conversation for the first round. Then he pops off in his draft year. The two defensemen still have a good year, but they fall. And so the center gets drafted over in what is a weak center class. After Austin Matthews, I think Pierre-Luc Dubois, and then that was it. And then it was like Logan Brown. He gets drafted over the two defensemen, and the two defensemen are Charlie McAvoy and I forget the other guy's name. Jacob Chychrun.
Yeah,
Jacob Chychrun. And the centers was Tyson Jost. And so if you look at the comparables there, like, okay, Verhoff is only getting deemed or, getting ranked down the board because they didn't like his NCAA year. But why, if we are not, downgrading McKenna for challenging himself at the NCAA, why are we doing that for Verhoff? You know what I mean? Like, why are we contradicting ourselves here? And it just seems like history might repeat itself if you take the center who's rising and deserves to rise in a weak center class over a defenseman who's been the top defensive prospect who decided to challenge himself in their draft year. And who would you rather have right now? Would you rather have the guys making 9 sheets on your blue line or Tyson Jost, who's going to find his, 6th team in 10 years?
Yeah, for sure.
It's not a perfect parable, but...
For sure. Let's pivot a little bit. Sorry,
I've got to jump in here. There's been a big trade. I put it in the private chat. Tillo sent a super chat as well.
Okay, sorry. Do I read the super chat before I read the super chat? Do I read the ad before the super chat? Sorry, I don't know.
Do whatever you want.
Our super chat charity partner this season is the BC Mental Health Foundation. You want to make sure your question or comment gets on the show. Hit us with the super chat. Proceeds of our super chat will go to BC Mental Health Foundation, changing the face of mental health and addiction by supporting breakthroughs in care, public understanding, research, and knowledge exchange. From Twillo, Jordan Kyrou has been traded. Have you seen this, Harm? You know where?
I just saw it, yeah.
Washington Capitals. The return is 16th overall. So now they pick 11, 15, 16, and now 30? That's a haul. Connor McMichael and Milton Gastrin is the return. I called it. I knew that there was going to be another move before our show ended. Harm, initial thoughts?
Look, Jordan Kyrou is a great player. He's got 35, 40 goal potential. Value-wise, it's hard for me to overlook how much the Blues got in this situation because it's not just the 16th pick. Connor McMichael, I'm a big fan of the player, and he's almost like a worse version of Kyrou, where he's dynamic, he's inconsistent. Obviously, Kyrou's hit like massive goal totals that I don't think McMichael's ever going to hit, but if Jordan Kyrou is a first line bona fide winger, that caliber of player, I think Connor McMichael is kind of the middle six version of that. So to downgrade from Kyrou to McMichael, you get the 16th pick and Milton Gastrin, who's a pretty decent prospect. I was just reading Corey Pronman's report, expected to kind of have third line potential in the future. So I like the value the Blues got here, and especially with all the draft capital they have, it makes me wonder, are they going to use all those picks? Are they going to make a splash for somebody else? This offseason just gets spicier and spicier.
Yeah, I think it's kind of an overpay here by the Capitals. Like, Kyrou's a great player, but I don't know how much more I like him than a Connor McMichael. Especially a center at the center position too, right? I think McMichael needs a new contract, so depending on what he wants, like maybe in the round of $6 million, I'm not sure, but could get a discount there. But yeah, it's that's interesting. What do you think about it for the Capitals side? Like,
it's expensive. Like, don't get me wrong,
Kyrou in Washington.
Yeah, like Kyrou's a great player. I'm trying to pull up his production because I don't remember off the top of my head. Okay, yeah, so this was a down year, right? Like 18 goals, 46 points, but he's going to bounce back, right? You look at the goal totals before this season, 36, 31, 37, right? So he pops, he's giving you 35. No question about it. And his play driving metrics are strong, right? This isn't a guy that just puts up goals and is an empty calorie producer. He is really fast carrying the puck up the ice, sets the tables for others. And even though he can frustrate coaches at times with turnovers, his two-way metrics are actually better than you'd think for a player that doesn't have the best defensive reputation. But with that said, I'm looking at McMichael, and sure, for him as well, down year this year, 46 points, which is still pretty good. The year before that, he had 26 goals and 57 points. Right? So maybe McMichael isn't going to be consistent 57 point, 25 goal guy, but even if he's like, I think you can comfortably bank 50 points, maybe even a little bit more if he gets opportunity in St. Louis that he didn't quite get in Washington, because Washington has a bit of a deeper forward core. Like it's expensive. Cairo will give them more speed, and I think Washington's in an interesting spot because despite them having been contenders for so many years in that OV window, they have actually built a better system of under 23 talent than you imagine, right? They got Cole Hudson, Ryan Leonard, Miroshnichenko, Crystal, Ilya Protas dominated the AHL and looked good in the few NHL games he got down the stretch. Like that pipeline has legit talent. Plus, they traded John Carlson for that first round pick at the deadline. So in a way, people didn't expect the Caps to have an extra first round pick this year to trade. And I think that's part of why they were able to justify paying the premium to upgrade from McMichael to Kyrou. So I guess from that standpoint, it is expensive, but if there's a team that was positioned to be able to pay the premium, it is Washington.
No, totally. And I just pulled up the Capitals lines here on Daily Faceoff. I mean, it kind of seems like a perfect fit because, I mean, they've been trotting out Anthony Beauvillier on the top line with Strome and Ovi for a while. So you throw Jordan Kyrou on that top line with Stromer right there. And I don't know. I'm not going to say Alex Ovechkin can't score. He obviously still can, but he's kind of lost his fastball a little bit. He's not going to be putting putting up 30, 40 goals every year moving forward. We do have another comment here from David Quadrelli, if you ever heard of that guy. Guys, big fan of the show. Do you think the Canucks should trade for Hronek by the end of today with all these outrageous prices? Thanks. I'll hang up and listen. Arm.
What a smart question from a person I've never heard of in my life before. But yeah, no, seriously, yes, right? And yeah, we get it, right? The no movement clause is there, but you at least have to have, I think, the conversation and be open-minded, right? At least be open-minded. That's like, you don't have to trade him this offseason, right? I can understand the appeal of keeping him around for a couple more years, having him mentor William and Verlander, and by the time those guys are ready for and more established as top four defensemen, then okay, Hronek is still at an age where you can get premium assets for him, and the no move clause shifts to him having less protection. I get that appeal, but at least be open minded, and especially if a team comes calling and is willing to like overpay. I mean, I go back to what the Sabres were reportedly willing to trade for Colton Parayko, who's 32 years old. It was Radim Murtka and another first round pick, right? So, and Murtka was taken top 10 pretty recently. So not just, 2 first round picks, but Murtka's a prospect that was taken top 10. Like that's the kind of range we're talking about. So yeah, I think the Canucks have to at least be open-minded about the possibility. And if they get a strong offer, you got to entertain, or you got to be willing to at least have the conversation with this agent to say, hey, if there's this contending team that wants to pay a lot for you, you have an opportunity to go win. Would you accept this kind of trade? And the main pushback is, well, who's going to play top pair minutes and who's going to mentor the young defenseman? But the thing I keep coming back to is there's zero expectation on this team to be competitive over the next 2 or 3 years. right? Like this is the start of rebuild. If there's any point in a rebuild where you could justify, all right, we're gonna trade a Philip Hronek and sign, like, I don't care who it is, like Jacob Trouba in free agency, right? Like you trade Hronek, you have a bunch of money, go and overpay. You could overpay a guy like Jacob Trouba. Is he going to not play well in a top pair role? Yeah, like he's going to struggle, but that's kind of the point. Is you're going to be bad. He's going to give you the leadership qualities, and he's still like Trouba was playing top pair minutes in Anaheim with Jackson Lacombe this past season. So it's not as if you're throwing around like Vincent Desharnais on your top pair and it's going to be embarrassing, right? Like it's a veteran guy who's got that experience. You can trade Hronek and then replace him with a veteran that is a significant downgrade and yet still eats those minutes and shelters the young defenseman because there's no expectation to be competitive next season.
Absolutely. I got some more on that front on the Canucks news, but first we'll hear from the Vancouver Canadians. The Nat is turning 75 and get to anyone else. The Nat is turning 75 this year, and the Canadians will be celebrating all season long. New at the Nat this season, a triple O's on the concourse. Seas return home next Tuesday, June 30th, as they open back-to-back homestands. Get your tickets now. Call 604-872-5232 or check out CanadiansBaseball.com. Let's get to anyone else. And I'll just lead it off with this because you mentioned Hronek. Obviously, they should listen. I mean, look at these prices that are getting paid right now for it's just crazy. It's a trader's market right now, so the Canucks should be selling. Dollywall today on Donnie and Dolly had an update that Pettersson's name is out there. DeBrusk and is out there big time, sorry. Besser and DeBrusk's names are also out there. We kind of knew all of this already, but Hronek's name is not out there. And that's kind of where I'm starting to get a little worried. Like, why? Why is that? Are you not listening to him at all? Is nobody calling on him? I doubt no one's calling on him, but are you just continuing to say no? Because, sure, I can understand, like, oh, yeah, he doesn't want to leave Vancouver. He likes it here, whatever. But a team comes calling and, like, just say Tampa Bay. They come calling. They want Hronek because they just got rid of Radish. Right shot. You don't think Hronek would want to do that? Like, you don't think he'd want to go to a contender and win in a state like that? So how is his name just not out there at all? I don't understand.
Yeah, and you look at another team that needs right shot help and is looking to be aggressive this offseason, the Boston Bruins, right? They were in on Rasmus Andersson at the deadline before he eventually got traded to Vegas. And that's a team that is in win now mode. They're under pressure because they want to maximize on Pasternak, Swayman, and McAvoy still being in their primes. They don't have a lot of time because Pasternak's about to turn 30. They have the extra pieces, right? They have the Leafs, the unprotected first round pick in 2027. They have a Panthers 2028 first round pick that they got in the Brad Marchand trade. So they've got extra first round picks that they can look to move. They've got cap space. They have a need behind McAvoy for another right shot defenseman because that was clearly a need for them, and especially because Hampus Lindholm has been slowing down. Like, ideally, I think Boston's first preference would be, let's pool these assets, try and get a number one defense or number one center. That's, of course, a bigger need. But if they can't land a number one center, then again, we just saw them in on the bidding for Rasmus Andersson. They clearly want a high profile right shot D if they can't get the center. And you go to Hronek and say, all right, original six franchise, you have experience playing in that division from all those years in Detroit. They're a win now team that's going to be in the playoffs every year. Would you consider at least have the conversation at this point?
It'll be interesting to see because I think what you see today, how can it not entice you a little bit to at least have the conversation, right? We got another super chat from 7 and 7. This feels like Caps made a trade for the sake of making a trade, and it cost them. Yeah, I don't know. I like Kyrou as a player. I'm surprised. The Blues always, like, what the Blues set their prices on their players to me is like some things I do in fantasy football where I'm like, okay, well, this is my guy. I have a little connection to him. I'm going to ask way more than his market value is. That's what I always feel like. Like the Robert Thomas asking price. I can't remember off the top of my head last year what it was, but I was just like blown away. I was like 3-4 first round picks for Robert Thomas. I was like, I don't know. It seems like a pretty penny. And so I'm just impressed that they continue to ask high prices and they still get paid what they want, right? Like you mentioned the Mertka trade. That was a high price to play for Colton Parayko. Obviously, it gets nixed, but yeah, I don't know. I never underestimate what the Caps do though, because they always seem to find the diamond in the rough. Like the Justin Sordiff trade, like that worked out really well for them. And if the Caps want your player, you probably shouldn't trade that player. So, I mean, they might see something in him. Maybe they consider this buying low on Jordan Kyrou, even though it's a high price to pay after a down year. But I don't know. I don't hate it for the Caps as much as I thought. Now that I'm thinking it through.
Yeah, and it's a fair point that with Washington's front office, you do have to give them the benefit of the doubt, because I also thought when they acquired Pierre Dubois, I was like, oh my God, after that year in LA where he was basically a third line center, taking on that contract, especially it was $8.5 million and the cap wasn't moving. He was one of the like highest paid centers. I was like, man, I get that they only gave up Darcy Kemper, who was a problem contract for them as well, because Kemper had been a backup at the time. But just the idea that offseason of any team taking on Pierre Dubois' contract was like unfathomable, not just because of the lack of on ice production, but because of all the character and work ethic question marks after he forced his way out of Columbus and then forcing his way out of Winnipeg and not working out in LA. Like there were so many red flags there, and yet he was obviously hurt this past year. He missed most of it because of injury, but in year one, the 2024-25 season, he was like a Selke caliber second line center, and it was a hell of a trade.
Yeah, it worked out for him. So and I mean they're drafting too, like Cole Hudson, what they found in the Protoss brothers. Like they seem to just keep hitting home run after home run.
I got one more question for you, actually, because
Yeah.
you guys just had Mathis Preston on earlier, and he's really interesting to me because like I understand the appeal, and I'm trying to understand just how highly the Canucks should be rating him in terms of potentially taking him with that 24th pick. He, of course, was a projected top 10 pick before the year started. Injury woes limited him. He's undersized, but quite fast and shifty. A lot of interesting tools there. And so that's kind of the upside case is, all right, here's a guy that might be going under the radar because he just got hurt in his draft year. However, there is still a meaningful enough sample of his production, and he was under a point per game. And that's a flip side of the coin, is you're looking at an undersized winger who was below a point per game in the dub. And hey, maybe there's more context in the sense that, all right, even when he was playing, he like doesn't mean he was at 100% health. So that's something you'd have to keep in mind. But in general, the idea of taking an undersized winger who's below a point per game in his draft year in the dub, not by a lot, but still below that mark, it isn't usually the best profile to bet on. So I'm curious where you stand in weighing up like both sides of that coin and the different arguments there.
Well, if after doing all this research into like scoring profiles and stuff, I've come to realize that and I don't want to say this too negatively, but this draft isn't very deep. Like the scoring profiles on some of these guys in the second half are not what you kind of see in regular years. It's kind of considered a weaker class, and so that's why I don't mind taking, like, you bring up all the right stuff, like under point per game and everything. That's concerning. You know, he was kind of a center, now he's moving to wing, and he is a little undersized. But what really hits home for me is like when the players were asked, like, oh, who's the most skilled in this draft? Like I think your colleagues had a player poll, scouting poll, and or a prospect poll, sorry. And they said Mathis Preston was just right up there with Gavin McKenna. And I mean, you see it. And I asked him, like, do you think you're being slept on a little bit in this class because, like I mentioned, it's not necessarily deep, and you were projected to go high, but then an injury kind of derails your season. He was also traded halfway through the year. From what I've heard, I didn't follow the Spokane Chiefs closely when he was there, but it kind of sounded like it wasn't a great team, and everything didn't have fully a ton of support over there. So can't really blame him. It's not like he had that much with the Giants. He had Ryan Lynn a little bit when he was playing with him, but if his peers are saying that, yeah, he's one of the best offensive skilled players in the draft, I'm going to listen to that. And I'm going to remember like the eye test over a lot of, the stats, the scoring profiles. And I know that kind of contradicts everything that I'm going through with all of that. But like I said, it matters to me what you've done before. So that's kind of why I'm okay and I'm high on Preston, because if everybody else is saying that he's one of the top skilled guys, and there's really not a lot of those, especially when you get in the back half of the first round, then that's kind of what sells me on taking a Preston. Because what happens next year? Like, he could fully well blow up with the Giants, being the number one guy on that team. And so, like, with all the skill in the world. So that's why you just don't get that. Because look at the other guys that are projected to go there. Like, are you really going to take like a Brooks Rogowski because he's 6'7"? And I'm happy Quads isn't on here because he'd say yes. But Brooks Rogowski or a Maddox Dejanay or something like that, where they don't have that statistical profile, but they have the size, and their projection is like a third line center defensively. Or you get a Mathis Preston where he's kind of more, he could be a second line winger who puts up like 60 points, 50 points, something like that. So that's why I'm kind of sold on Preston at that point.
Yeah, that's fair. You're right that there's depth in this draft as far as guys that have the projectable tools to actually like play NHL games. But in terms of players that will be like true impact difference makers, like top 6 forwards, top 4 defensemen, there is a fall off. And by the time you get to the Canucks pick at 24, I can certainly understand the appeal of maybe taking more of an upside swing on Preston and banking on the talent, because you're right. There always is a balance between weighing the numbers and the eye test. It is funny, right? Because if I think historically teams have not put enough stock into the production, because if you put stock into production, and this is where like I see some people dunking on some of the NHL like draft projection models that, like, let's say the hockey stats folks have, where it's like, oh man, they didn't think Jackson Blake was going to become anything, and then look at what he's become. But that's not showing all the examples in the reverse, where if you leaned on the scoring profiles a little bit more, you'd probably look at the Canucks in 2016 and say, hey, why are we taking Olli Levy, who, yeah, he's a defenseman, so we don't expect him to put up a lot of points, but still like well below the point per game mark on a stacked London Knights team. Like that makes no sense. Meanwhile, we got Matthew Tkachuk who put up 1 billion points. Like, you wouldn't have those types of misses. Or like 2014, the Jake Virtanen pick, where it's like, hold on a second, William Nylander's production is pretty historical by SHL norms, or even Nick Ehlers is ripping it up. Whereas Virtanen, he's scoring a lot of goals, but because he doesn't have a playmaking element, his actual point totals are like good, but they're not elite. They're not the best in that range. So that's why I lean on scoring profiles matter. And it's why a guy like Zach Benson, right, tore up the WHL. Everybody was like, oh, he's small. He drops way further than he should. And you see what he's becoming now in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Or Logan Stankoven, right? A guy, tons of production. All the production was there. It was just a size question. And then you see the team that was willing to roll the dice benefit from that. But obviously, you're not going to make picks just off of points and stats and whatnot, because there's so much you pick up when you watch these players actually play.
No notes, Harm. No notes. One thing, I thought we'd end on a good note, a fun note. Mike Babcock is the head coach of the Edmonton Oilers now.
Well, I guess if you're an Oilers
it's
hater,
funny.
that is fun though. Yeah.
It's funny for Canucks Conversations listeners to hear about bad things about the Edmonton Oilers. So I don't know if you heard the his press conference today. I didn't get a chance to listen to it. What do you have to say about the hire?
I mean, the Oilers are essentially saying we don't care what he's like as a human being. We just think he is somehow the best coach to help us, which like I wouldn't have touched Mike Babcock with a 10-foot pole. But clearly this is a situation where they look at not only his resume where he had that success in Detroit, and people will say, yeah, he hasn't won a playoff series in a really long time, and that's of course valid, but also like Team Canada, and also anecdotally, even the Babcock haters, which like most people in the industry that I've talked to, like would not hire Mike Babcock to be an NHL head coach in the year 2026. Even those people admit that, hey, if you're talking pure like the hockey side of it, he is still like tactically a very impressive head coach in terms of his knowledge and his preparation. And specifically, I talked to a couple weeks ago when he was first starting to get connected to this Oilers job. I talked to a front office source that was part of one of Babcock's former teams, and again, this was a person that was straight up like, yeah, I would not have hired Mike Babcock for our team. But this person said, like, even though I'm not the biggest fan of him as a person and he wouldn't be my hire, when you do interact with him, you do immediately realize like this guy is on another level compared to a lot of other NHL head coaches. And so the bet here is we aren't putting really any stock into culture or how he's going to treat players. And really, this is going to be more of a damper for players further down the lineup, because obviously he's going to treat McDavid and Hyman and those leadership guys well. It's the rookies, it's the third, fourth liners, the third pair defensemen that you feel for. If you're Edmonton, you're basically saying throw all that out the window. We think he's the best hire because he's won a cup. And look, that's not a bet I'd be willing to make if I was Edmonton, but it should make for a ton of drama throughout the season. Like, can you imagine the moment Edmonton goes on a losing streak in November, as they do every single year, where you're going to have the McDavid storyline around, oh, is he going to leave now? On top of that, all the Babcock stuff. Like this team just is not going to be able to stay out of the headlines.
I'll be grabbing my popcorn and watching all season long because it's going to be funny. I wonder how it affects, them bringing people in, bringing other players. I don't know. The free agent market is pretty much dead this year, but I do wonder about trades. Like, do a couple team or players now have the Oilers on their do not trade list because they don't want to be exposed to whatever kind of locker room that Babcock's going to have? And I mean, Vancouver learned firsthand what a bad locker room can do for a team, and it might just break up the Edmonton Oilers.
For sure. And again, I just wouldn't want to hitch my keep McDavid plan on Mike Babcock in the year 2026. But hey, the Oilers are going to do whatever they're going to do. I mean, clearly when they went out and hired Stan Bowman, they didn't care about all the question marks around Bowman and the Kyle Beach stuff. They're just looking at, have you won a cup before? And apparently that's all it takes to get you hired. I'll say this, a Bowman Babcock tandem might have gone hard in like 2014, 2013. 13 years later, I don't know about it.
What a duo. Anyways, all right. Did you have anything else before we get to Bet365?
Nope.
All right. I've got a bet right now, and it's kind of ties into everything we kind of talked about. We talked about the draft and everything and all the crazy trades and stuff. But if you go on Bet365, they have an NHL Draft 2026, and you can bet on some players to go where they're going to go in the draft. And I'm looking at one right now. Picking the NHL Draft, top 5 pick, Carson Karls, minus 140 odds. I'm going to take it. I'm high on Karl, so I got to put my money where my mouth is. And I mean, by all reports, I hear that the Rangers really like him if Malhotra's not there. It makes sense for Chicago at number 4 to pair him up with Levshinov. So you got 2 chances there in my eyes, especially if Canucks go Reed at 3. He would be the next available guy. So makes sense to me. Minus 140 odds on Bet365. The worst thing about the hockey season, is that at some point every year it ends. There's a lot of time between now and the first puck drop of next season, which feels like an eternity for those of us who are used to nightly games. Sorry. The good news is that Bet365 still has plenty of games, just none that require lacing up your skates. At Bet365 Casino, you can choose between hundreds of slots, live tables, and your favorite games. Well, maybe your second favorite game. Must be 19 years or older. Please play responsibly. All right, that'll do it for the show. Not sure what the rest of the week looks like, but I know that there will be a live show for the draft. On draft day, be sure to join Tyson Cole. Hi, that's me. And a string of surprise guests for our watch along of round 1 right here on Canucks Army YouTube channel. Live reaction, real-time coverage, and analysis. We'll have everything you need for draft day. It all kicks off Friday, June 26th at 4 p.m. Pacific, right here on the Canucks Army YouTube channel. Thanks for suffering through me hosting the show, Harm. Hopefully I wasn't too bad. Hopefully your ears aren't bleeding. But I had a fun time.
No, dude, you were awesome. Always a pleasure chatting with you, and excited for more opportunities to chat with you in the future. I'm sure we're going to have you back on later on as the Canucks. It's funny, Canucks haven't really got in on the spiciness of the offseason yet, but we know that's coming, especially with the draft in just a few days.
Absolutely. Well, I'll be looking forward to it. Anyways, thank you guys so much for tuning in to another episode of Canucks Conversation. For Tyson, he's Harm, and Jake Fraser in the back. Appreciate it, and have a great day, everybody.
Canucks Conversation is live Monday through Friday, every weekday at 2 p.m. over on the Canucks Army YouTube channel. Make sure you like, subscribe, and interact in the YouTube live chat.